With the 2022 World Cup just around the corner, the Qatari hosts have pledged to make it a carbon-neutral event, much to the disbelief of many around the game. The tournament will also be without the previous host, Russia, as Vladimir Putin's war in Ukraine means they will not be welcome as it begins this weekend. Today, we're discussing reports that a carbon-neutral World Cup is fantasy, plus news of the Russians staying home. First up, we're talking bid rigging. Stay with us. As you will know by now, the Qatar World Cup, set to kick off in a matter of days as the host country takes on Ecuador, has been plagued in controversy ever since it was awarded the tournament back in 2010. The votes for the hosts of the 2018 and 2022 World Cups were held at the same time back in 2010, but a recent documentary on Netflix appears to insinuate that there has been a litany of corruption behind Qatar being awarded the greatest show on earth. Qatar, the tiny Middle Eastern nation with absolutely zero football history or culture, beat off competition from Australia, Korea, and Japan, who held arguably the greatest World Cup of all time back in 2002, and USA. However, last year the US claimed that representatives of both Russia and Qatar had bribed FIFA officials to make sure their nations received the tournament. Of course, this came as a surprise to absolutely nobody, as it is widely believed that FIFA is one of the least honorable governing bodies in the whole sport. U.S. prosecutors released details of how money was paid to 5 members of FIFA's top board before the announcement back in 2010, as Russia beat out the likes of England, and Qatar inexplicably beat their competitors to host the premier football festival. The United States believes that 3 South American officials received payments to cast their votes in favor of the Gulf state. Hardly surprising, right? So who is most likely to win it? Let's see. Enough of all the negativity already. There's a World Cup tournament to get stuck into. Undoubtedly, all the big boys will receive plenty of backing from football fans. But as usual, Brazil heads into the competition as a clear favorite, despite leaving Liverpool striker Roberto Firmino out of the squad. They come into the competition on the back of 15 games unbeaten, so whoever manages to beat the Seleção will be well placed to win the whole thing. Of course, the usual suspects are also in contention, as Argentina and France are not far off Brazil, starting the tournament with prices of 5-1 and 13-2 respectively. As reigning champions, France will be expected to get to the final at least, and Argentina have Messi, so anything is possible there. After reaching the semi-final last time out and the final of Euro 2020, England comes in as a 7-1 shot. However, they're currently going through a barren spell of 6 games without a win, so the tournament could have come at the wrong time for the Harry Kane-led outfit. Portugal's aging squad, featuring a 37-year-old Ronaldo, will surely have too much to do, but there is some action on an experimental Spain side, and a German squad featuring the exciting young talent Youssoufa Moukoko of Borussia Dortmund. There is also the Netherlands and a slightly older Belgian squad to consider. Who is your tip to win it? We're discussing Qatar's carbon-neutral fantasy next. Stick around. As Qatar was awarded the 2022 World Cup 12 years ago, their representatives made the outlandish claims that the event would be carbon-neutral. But of course, those claims were almost instantly written off as delusional. Their prediction echoed Germany's in 2006, but as a massive oil-producing nation, many asked how on earth they could achieve this target. Qatar had to build most of their stadiums, so they were on the back foot from the get-go. When you consider the fact that they are also expected to welcome around 1 million spectators from around the world, with the overwhelming majority arriving by airplane, you start to realize why their claims were instantly dismissed. The World Cup in Qatar is expected to generate around 6 million tons of emissions, which is roughly equivalent to 750,000 average-sized homes each year. This has prompted carbon management company Greenly to describe the upcoming tournament as the most emissive ever. Of course, most of these emissions have come in the build-up to the tournament, as the country has spent millions, if not billions, on new stadiums. They had to build 7 brand new facilities from scratch, with only 1 being built from materials which can be dismantled. This means that a country with little to no footballing culture will be left with 6 world-class stadiums, which will almost certainly be used for very little. What do you guys make of this issue? What else do we know about Qatar's carbon-neutral plan? Many critics quite obviously have suggested that Qatar's plans for a carbon-neutral event are simply fantasy. If we look at Brazil and Russia as case studies, the previous 2 tournament hosts, both countries have stadiums which are no longer in use. Both of these countries have a far greater population than Qatar too, so the likelihood is that their stadiums will follow a similar fate. Gilles Dufresne, policy officer over at Carbon Market Watch, was quoted as saying, "It's just extremely unlikely that Qatar would have ever built these stadiums without the World Cup, and it's also very unlikely that they will be used efficiently for the next 60 years, which of course is difficult to disagree with. It is also thought that the stadia combined will release as many emissions as a coal-fired power plant releases in 16 months. Eesh! Qatar's claims of hosting a carbon-neutral World Cup are actually counterproductive, not least because those claims are virtually impossible to prove. As we all well know, it is impossible to reverse emissions and unburn fossil fuels which have been used to build stadiums and fan villages, or fly to Doha, or do any of the other numerous amounts of destructive things whilst on holiday in Qatar. One critic was quoted as saying that no event is carbon neutral until the whole world is, which is hard to refute. Give us your best green initiatives below. We're talking Russia next. Stay tuned. It's safe to say Russia is taking a time out in the metaphorical global naughty corner right now, as their illegal war in Ukraine rolls on. It is a shame that Russia's standing on the world scene has been reduced to this, given how successful the 2018 World Cup was. But whilst we're all tuning in to watch the opening game this weekend, the Russians will be focusing on the real big game, Uzbekistan away. They were kicked out of qualifying as Putin decided to subject his neighbor to a deadly conflict, and FIFA members are no longer being forced to play matches against them. This follows a blanket ban on most Russian athletes and sports teams globally, as their football teams have been removed from UEFA competitions and their athletes barred from competing in a whole host of other sports. Russia actually made it to the World Cup qualifying playoffs, but Poland's refusal to travel to Moscow resulted in Russia being kicked out. Nobody was about to force the Poles to travel to an aggressive nation with a history of egregious invasions. FIFA explained that allowing the Russians to take part would almost certainly result in blanket protests and irreparable and chaotic damage to its signature product, the World Cup itself. In a further development, Ukraine lobbied FIFA, to no avail, to remove Iran from the upcoming tournament as they claim Russia are using Iranian weapons to target their cities. What a mess! Do you think it's fair that Russia is banned? What has Putin had to say about the whole saga then? Let's see. Vladimir Putin is currently persona non grata in many countries around the world, and as rumors began to develop that Russia could actually play a friendly against Iran in Qatar ahead of the World Cup, Putin himself said that sports should unite, not divide people. Of course, his war in Ukraine is one of the biggest dividers of people in the world right now, so many say he should practice what he preaches. As that game against Iran never materialized, the Russians booked a highly prestigious tour of its former Soviet states in Central Asia against Uzbekistan and Tajikistan. Can you detect the sarcasm? It has previously been suggested that Russia could take on Bosnia-Herzegovina a couple months back, but those plans were quickly vetoed as Captain Edin Dzeko came out in support of Ukraine and denounced any idea of a game against Russia. Qatar has recently given Russia credit for helping out in preparation for the event, with Putin himself remarking, "We are also doing everything we can in terms of transferring the experience of preparing for the World Cup." Of course, nobody knows what this support entails, but we do know that Russia will thankfully be nowhere near Qatar as the tournament kicks off this Sunday, November 21st. What do you make of Putin's protestations? As usual, thanks for stopping by today, and don't forget to swing by again next time for some more fun reveals. And why not do us a big favor by liking, sharing, and subscribing to our channel. Bye, guys.